Welcome to Eerie Hour. Tonight, I'm exposing 6 shocking cruise ship disasters the industry never wanted the world to know about. Real stories, not legends, backed by survivors and official reports. From the Aurora Magnificent's murder that shook headlines worldwide, to the celebrity Millennium tragedy where 19 people never made it out of Alaska's frozen waters. These are tales of paradise turning into horror. Hit that subscribe button if you want the truth they try to bury, and get ready for 6 chilling cases that will change how you see cruise ships forever. Our first story begins with a couple who thought they booked the trip of a lifetime. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments, what country are you watching from? I'd love to see where our viewers are tuning in from, and if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Story 1. The Couple Next Door. Paradise on the high seas can quickly turn dark because luxury walls can't hide the screams from the next room. The Aurora Magnificence was meant to be a dream vacation on water. When Clayton and Juliana booked their ocean view suite for their 5th anniversary, they pictured champagne sunsets and romantic dinners under Caribbean skies. Room 7832 on deck 12 seemed perfect. Huge windows, a private balcony, and bathrooms so expensive they cost more per night than most people pay for rent. But sometimes perfect places hide the darkest secrets. Married for 5 years, the couple hoped this cruise from Miami to the Caribbean would bring back the romance slipping away under the weight of Clayton's long hours as a cybersecurity analyst and Juliana's stressful job as an ER doctor at Jackson Memorial Hospital. They boarded on a warm July evening in 2024, their next-door cabin occupied by another couple who seemed to have the perfect life. Clayton, 32, was a detail-focused tech expert whose sharp mind brought him success, but often left him blind to emotions. Juliana, 29, was a doctor used to seeing pain and danger with instincts that never failed her. Together, they were the picture of a young American couple, driven, educated, and hopeful. In room 7834 stayed Cohen and Miriam. He was a 45-year-old New York investment banker with money and status. She, a 38-year-old former Miss Ohio, ran a thriving design company in Columbus. They had beauty, wealth, and what looked like real love. Miriam was striking, tall, blonde, and friendly in a way that drew people in. Cohen was polished and smooth, always in expensive clothes, ready with stories of finance and fine wines. The two couples quickly became close, sharing dinners, excursions, and theater nights. Miriam asked Juliana about her medical work with what seemed like real interest. Cohen impressed Clayton with finance stories. It all felt natural and easy. But Juliana's trained eye noticed things no one else did. Miriam's smile always looked forced. She waited for Cohen's approval before speaking, even at restaurants. She wore long sleeves in the Caribbean heat. During a stop in Cozumel, Juliana saw something that chilled her. Miriam admired a handmade turquoise bracelet in a local shop, only to put it down quickly when Cohen arrived. "That junk doesn't suit you," he said smoothly, insisting Tiffany jewelry was better for her class. Miriam's hand trembled as she agreed, her face pale. The elderly shopkeeper shook her head sadly at Juliana, as though she had seen this before with many tourists. Late that night, Juliana was woken by raised voices next door. Cohen's smooth tone was gone, replaced by rage. "You embarrassed me today, Miriam. Laughing at that bartender like some cheap woman. Do you think I don't notice?" Miriam's voice shook as she tried to explain, but his anger only grew. The voices dropped, then Juliana heard muffled sobs. She wanted to call security, but she knew from her ER work that abuse was complicated and victims often stayed silent. At breakfast the next day, Miriam wore oversized sunglasses in the dim dining hall. When she reached for coffee, Juliana spotted dark bruises around her wrist, clear handprints. Clayton, busy checking his work emails, didn't notice, but Juliana did. Later, during a couple's massage, Juliana found a chance to speak alone with Miriam. "I'm a doctor. I know what those marks are. If you need help, I'll listen." For a second, Miriam's mask cracked, and Juliana saw pure fear in her eyes, but Miriam's words came rehearsed. "Everything's perfect. Cohen takes wonderful care of me. Any woman would want this life." Her hands shook as she spoke, eyes darting toward the door as if Cohen might appear. That night, Juliana was jolted awake by violent sounds, furniture crashing, glass shattering. Then Miriam's terrified voice rang out, "Please, Cohen, I wasn't trying to leave. The money was for your birthday surprise." A harsh slap cut through the walls. Clayton woke instantly, his instincts sharp. They both listened, footsteps dragging, more chaos. Then Miriam's pleading voice, "No, not the balcony. Please, I'll do anything." Seconds later came the scream, starting human, then cut off too soon. Clayton reached for the phone, but Cohen's voice came first, calm and controlled, speaking to security. "Yes, this is Cohen in room 7834. My wife. There's been a horrible accident. She fell from our balcony. Please send help." His tone was flawless, perfectly rehearsed, sounding broken and desperate. If Juliana hadn't heard the violence before, even she might have believed him. Within minutes, the hallway filled with security, medics, and senior staff. Through their peephole, Clayton and Juliana saw Cohen, now dressed quickly in a polo shirt, scratches across his neck and face, telling his story to Captain Elise. He claimed Miriam had been drunk, they argued over money, and she stormed to the balcony. He said he tried to stop her, but she slipped away. The scratches, he explained, came from trying to pull her back. Lionel, the head of ship security, had once been a Miami-Dade police officer. In his 8 years at sea, he had seen a dozen balcony incidents. The state of Cohen's cabin set off alarms immediately. The balcony door was bent from being forced open. Miriam's glass had been thrown, not dropped. Blood drops on the balcony railing didn't match someone climbing over on their own. And then came Juliana's testimony. She had been quietly noting Miriam's signs for days, the flinches, the hidden bruises, the fear in her eyes. Her account was now the strongest piece of evidence against Cohen. Clayton's technical skills allowed him to give exact details about the sounds they heard. He explained with careful precision that Miriam's scream lasted about 2.3 seconds before it was cut off. And then there was silence. From deck 12, with the force of gravity, a fall into the sea should have made a splash between 2.8 and 3.1 seconds later. But no splash was heard. Juliana added her own expert view as a doctor. Those were not the cries of someone wanting to end their life. Those were the desperate sounds of someone fighting to survive. Lionel's careful investigation uncovered disturbing evidence. Miriam's fingerprints were on the inside of the balcony railing, showing she was trying to cling on, not climb over. Cohen's body carried clear defensive injuries, deep scratches on his arms and neck, even what looked like a bite on his shoulder. Miriam's iPhone was found smashed against the marble bathroom wall, its screen shattered. Records showed she had only ordered 1 glass of wine, far from the drunken state Cohen described. Most revealing of all, Lionel found her laptop hidden behind the cabin safe. When the FBI cyber unit unlocked it, they found months of proof, photos of bruises, voice recordings of threats, and unsent emails to lawyers specializing in domestic abuse. While the crew launched a late-night search of the dark Caribbean waters, though everyone knew the chances of success were slim, Lionel worked with FBI agent Noah to dig into Cohen's past. What they found was horrifying. His first wife, Elena, had died in 2018 from a fall down the stairs during what neighbors described as a loud fight. Police ruled it an accident. His second wife, Maisie, divorced him in 2021 after accusing him of abuse, but later dropped her case after receiving millions in a private settlement and signing a strict non-disclosure agreement. Miriam, it turned out, had been preparing to escape. Bank records showed small secret transfers into a hidden Ohio account. Just 2 days before the cruise, she called her sister Lilith in Cleveland, saying she had finally built the courage to leave and asking to stay with her after returning. The strongest piece of evidence came from Miriam's own voice. On her phone, a recording made 3 hours before her death captured Cohen's rage. "You think you can divorce me, Miriam? Take half of what's mine and go play house in Ohio? I'll see you dead before I let that happen." In the same file, Miriam's soft reply begged for peace, only for Cohen to respond with threats, reminding her of Elena's death and claiming no one would ever believe otherwise. Armed with these recordings, the physical proof, and eyewitness accounts, Lionel and Agent Noah confronted Cohen as the ship sailed back toward Miami. The mask of grief fell away, replaced with cold arrogance. "You have nothing but the lies of a disturbed woman," Cohen snapped, claiming Miriam was unstable, depressed, and had long threatened suicide. But the evidence told another story. The ship's doctor documented his defensive wounds. The destroyed cabin showed clear violence. Miriam's secret files painted a picture of control, abuse, and planned escape. Because the Aurora Magnificence was registered in the United States and the crime took place in international waters, the FBI had authority. Cohen was arrested and held in the ship's brig until docking in Miami, where federal agents took custody. Faced with overwhelming evidence, his lawyers pushed him toward a plea deal. He admitted guilt to second-degree murder and received a sentence of 30 years to life in federal prison. The tragedy changed Clayton and Juliana forever. Juliana left the ER to study forensic medicine and became a leading voice on domestic violence cases. Clayton used his cyber skills to help shelters protect women's digital safety. Together, they created the Miriam Foundation, a group that provides technology support for abuse victims and has trained over 2,000 cruise staff members to spot and respond to danger. The Aurora Magnificence also changed, adding panic buttons in rooms, mandatory staff training, and a partnership with the National Abuse Hotline. Miriam's body was never found in the endless waters, but her voice remained, captured in recordings that ensured her killer would never walk free. Her sister Lilith planted a memorial garden in their hometown in Columbus, marked with a marble stone that reads simply, "Miriam, her courage saved others." Room 7. 1834 was eventually rebuilt and returned to service, but crew members whisper that on quiet nights as the ship passes those same waters, you can still faintly hear someone calling for help. A chilling reminder that the sea keeps its secrets, but justice always rises in time. Domestic violence touches 1 in 4 American women. If you or someone close to you needs help, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-79-73. You are not alone, and help is available day and night. The next nightmare emerges. Story 2. The Fake Room Service. And it starts with a woman who thought room service was just being extra polite until she realized the person at her door wasn't crew at all. Oilia believed she was about to enjoy the trip of her life when she booked her dream Caribbean cruise. What she didn't know was that someone on board had been waiting for her for months and already knew exactly which room she would be staying in. This is the true story of how a simple food delivery turned into the most terrifying 72 hours she would ever face. Oilia, a 28-year-old marketing professional from Denver, had been saving and planning this trip for over a year. After long weeks of 60-hour shifts, she finally booked a 10-day Eastern Caribbean trip aboard Royal Caribbean's Voyager of the Seas in March 2023. "I wanted to reward myself," she told investigators later. "I'd never taken a cruise before, and everyone promised it would be the most relaxing vacation ever." She chose an inside stateroom on Deck 7, room 7342, because it was away from the loud areas and near no elevators. What she didn't know was that someone had been tracking her booking long before she even set foot on the ship. The ship left Miami on a sunny Sunday afternoon with over 3,000 passengers and about 1,200 staff members. Oilia was traveling by herself, her first solo trip in years, and she planned everything down to the smallest detail. She booked tours in Cozumel, St. Thomas, and Barbados, reserved dinners at the specialty restaurants, and even arranged spa appointments in advance. The first 2 days felt like bliss. "I felt free and independent. I was finally doing something for myself," she remembered. But on the third day, while the ship sailed toward St. Thomas, things began to shift. It started with room service she never ordered. Around 11:30 p.m. Tuesday night, there was a quiet knock on her door. Looking through the peephole, she saw a man in a white crew uniform holding a tray. "Room service for Miss Oilia," he said with a thick accent. "I didn't order room service," she replied. "Complimentary late-night service," the man insisted. "Special arrangement from guest services. You requested dietary needs." Confused but not yet alarmed, she opened the door. The man was thin, early 30s, pale with dark hair, wearing a name tag that read, "Dante, Food Service." But what caught her attention was the way his eyes scanned her cabin, as if memorizing everything inside. She told him she hadn't asked for anything, but he placed the tray on her desk anyway. "Must be error, but it's ready. Chocolate strawberries and champagne, complimentary for solo guests. Enjoy your night, Miss Oilia." Before she could say anything else, Dante was gone, walking quickly down the hall. Oilia looked over the tray. It looked normal, real cruise silverware, perfect presentation. But something wasn't right. The strawberries were arranged oddly, almost like a coded design, and the champagne glass already had lipstick on it. Alarmed, she called guest services to confirm the so-called promotion. "I'm sorry, Miss Oilia," the desk agent said. "We don't have any record of a complimentary service for your room." Her stomach dropped. Over the next 24 hours, Dante appeared 3 more times. On Wednesday morning at 6:45 a.m., he knocked, claiming her cabin needed a safety inspection. She refused to let him in and immediately called security, but by the time they arrived, he had vanished. Later that day, she returned from the pool to find her cabin strangely altered. Her belongings were moved, her journal was open to another page, and the air smelled of an unfamiliar cologne. That night, she was stunned to see Dante again, this time dressed as a waiter in the main dining room. He leaned toward her with a forced smile. "Would you like our special dessert, Miss Oilia? I made it just for you." Terrified, she stood up. "Leave me alone now." His friendly tone broke for a second, replaced by something cold. "You've been very unfriendly, Miss Oilia. On ships, we take care of guests who show gratitude." Shaken, she ran to security and reported everything. This time, Chief Officer Christian took her seriously, especially when she mentioned Dante's disturbing comment. "Ma'am," he told her after checking the records, "we don't have any food service worker named Dante, and no one of that description works on Deck 7. Security cameras revealed something even worse. The footage showed Dante approaching her room, but also sneaking into other solo female cabins on different decks, always with the same tray, always late at night. That evening, security launched an operation. Oilia was moved to a safe room on Deck 12, while officers hid near her original cabin. Just before midnight, Dante returned to 7342 with his tray. This time, he didn't knock. He used a master key card to enter directly. Inside the tray, officers found zip ties, duct tape, a syringe with an unknown liquid, and personal items belonging to at least 6 different women: jewelry, underwear, photos. Dante wasn't crew at all. He was a passenger staying on deck too, using stolen uniforms and key cards provided by a corrupt staff member. The truth was far worse. Investigators discovered Dante had been stalking solo women on different cruise lines for more than 2 years. He used insider connections to access booking records, choosing victims before the cruises even began. He had files on at least a dozen women on this voyage alone. Security later found his cabin turned into a twisted shrine, walls covered in secret photos, stolen belongings organized by date and ship, and a journal with detailed notes about each victim. Oilia's section was 3 pages long, filled with violent fantasies of what he planned during the rest of the trip. The probe uncovered that he wasn't working alone. A housekeeper named Bowen had been selling Dante master keys and passenger information for years, giving him access for $500 per guest. Bowen had connections on other ships too, creating a network that let predators stalk women across different voyages. This was a structured criminal system, FBI agent Jalen explained when the ship docked in St. Thomas. They tracked, targeted, and accessed victims across several cruise lines. Both men were arrested in St. Thomas. Dante faced charges of stalking, unlawful entry, possession of drugs with intent to harm, and stolen property. Bowen faced conspiracy, theft, and major security violations. The investigation spread to at least 3 other cruise companies, linking Dante to 23 women across 15 different trips. The scariest part wasn't just Dante, Oilia later admitted. It was realizing how exposed I was, how easy it was for someone to watch me, and how many others could have been at risk. The case forced major industry changes: tighter crew background checks, stricter limits on who could see booking details, more cameras in passenger hallways, rules for reporting suspicious staff behavior, and stronger work with international law enforcement. But for Oilia and others, the damage was already done. "People think cruise ships are safe because of all the staff and cameras," she said. "But none of that matters if the ones you trust are the ones breaking the rules. Always listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never assume someone in uniform belongs there." What began as a dream getaway became a nightmare, but because Oilia spoke up and security acted quickly, a predator was stopped before more women were hurt. This story comes from real events recorded in maritime crime files. Names have been changed for privacy. If you plan a cruise, report anything suspicious right away. Safety depends on staying alert, even in paradise. Another chilling account surfaces, and this tale begins with 2218. Story 3. Trapped by ice passengers thought they were heading toward Paradise Glaciers until the ice decided to take their ship forever. What I'm about to share happened on the Celebrity Millennium in September 2023. There were 2,218 passengers on board when the impossible happened at 3:15 a.m. in the lonely waters of Alaska's Inside Passage. By sunrise, the ship was stuck hard against a glacier, and 19 people were gone. I was passenger number 1,847. And this is my story. It was meant to be the journey of a lifetime. My wife, Lola, and I had always dreamed of seeing Alaska's frozen glaciers and the wildlife of the North. We are both teachers from Colorado, and this trip was our gift to ourselves for our 20th anniversary. The Celebrity Millennium was said to be perfect for Alaska. It was smaller than the giant Caribbean cruise ships, with just 2,218 passengers, made for cruising through narrow fjords and icy waters. Our balcony cabin on Deck 9 had amazing views of snowy mountains and untouched land. The first 3 days were like a dream. We saw totem poles in Ketchikan, whales jumping in Juneau, and Skagway's history of the gold rush. Everything felt magical. On the fourth day, we were sailing at night toward Glacier Bay National Park. The skies were clear, the air was sharp, and the waters calm. Lola went to bed early, ready for tomorrow's glacier visit. I stayed late in the Crown and Anchor Lounge on Deck 11, watching the northern lights move across the sky. At 3:10 a.m., I checked my watch and thought about heading back to our cabin. That's when disaster struck. At 3:15 a.m., exactly, a sound like no other filled the ship. A deep growl and grinding roar rose up from the bottom of the vessel. The whole ship shook violently and lurched forward, throwing me out of my chair by the glass windows. The lights went out instantly. The night outside was total black, with no cities for hundreds of miles. People screamed as they realized something terrible had happened. Red emergency lights blinked on, filling the rooms and hallways in a dark glow. The captain's voice came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Sullivan. We have struck an underwater ice shelf in Glacier Bay. All passengers must report to your muster stations immediately. This is not a drill." An ice shelf? In September? How could that be? I pushed through crowds toward the stairwell since the elevators had already shut down. As I climbed from Deck 11 to Deck 9, the sounds grew worse. The ship had stopped moving, and a harsh scraping noise echoed from below. When I got to our cabin, Lola was already up, standing on our balcony in her robe, staring at the darkness. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Look." I stepped outside and froze. Just feet away was a wall of glowing blue-white ice, tall as a mountain, pressing right against us. The front of the ship was destroyed, water rushing into the lower decks. We quickly grabbed passports, jackets, and phones, knowing the cold Alaskan air could kill unprepared passengers fast. The hallways were filled with people heading for Muster Station C on Deck 6. Many were older travelers, some already panicking. In that chaos, we met a family from Minnesota, Ezekiel, his wife Lucille, their daughter Kalani, and their son Joaquin, who was missing after being thrown around in the teen center on Deck 10. The PA system came on again, this time with worse news. "Attention passengers, due to structural damage from ice impact, we are starting emergency evacuation. The nearest Coast Guard station is 180 miles away. Remain calm and follow instructions." 180 miles in freezing Alaskan waters. The thought was crushing. The next 2 hours felt like a nightmare. The ship was locked tight against the glacier, unable to move forward or back. The ice had ripped open a long tear in the hull below the waterline, and the sea was flooding in faster than pumps could control. Outside, the night air fell below 25 degrees Fahrenheit. Anyone in the water would be dead in minutes, but the ship couldn't survive either. Ezekiel and I decided to search for Joaquin ourselves, while our wives and daughter waited at the lifeboats. We climbed up to Deck 10, stepping through tilted hallways littered with broken furniture and smashed glass. The teen center was wrecked, the walls split from the crash. We found Joaquin pinned under a fallen pool table, his leg twisted and badly hurt. He was awake but in pain. Together, Ezekiel and I pulled the table off and helped him escape. Getting him down the stairs was slow, but when we looked outside, we saw distant helicopter lights. The Coast Guard was coming, but still an hour away. The ship was sinking deeper, the tilt sharper, and the constant sound of steel grinding against ice tore through our nerves. Back at the muster station, Lola and Lucille with Kailani were already assigned to Lifeboat 14. But lowering lifeboats against a leaning glacier-crushed ship was nearly impossible. Then came another order that made everyone shake in fear. "All passengers on decks 1 to 4, abandon ship immediately. Water has reached the main engines. This is a code red." Peering out at Glacier Bay, we saw lifeboats scattered in the icy black water. Some already rescued by Coast Guard cutters, others fighting to stay steady in the cold. At 5:30 a.m., with the first light touching the glacier, the sound we had all feared filled the air. The ship's hull was breaking apart under the ice. The Millennium was being crushed piece by piece as the glacier pressed harder against the steel frame. We could hear beams snap and metal fold like thin sticks. "We need to leave now," Ezekiel yelled. "The ship's giving in." Finally, our lifeboat was lowered. It dropped nearly 60 feet into the dark, freezing water. The cold air cut into our skin like knives, and even with jackets, Alaska's September night was brutal. Our lifeboat carried 47 people, some elderly already shivering hard. Lucille wrapped her arms around Kalani as they both shook. Joaquin gritted his teeth through the pain of his leg injury, determined not to cry out. We rowed fast, moving away from the dying ship as it groaned and cracked louder behind us. The sound was like a giant building collapsing in slow motion. For 3 endless hours we floated there, the sun rising over an icy land both beautiful and terrifying. The glacier that had ripped our ship apart was massive, shining in the daylight with shades of deep blue, ancient and merciless. The beauty was unreal, but it couldn't warm us. Passengers in our boat started losing consciousness from the cold. At 8:45 a.m., a Coast Guard helicopter spotted us. The rescue swimmer who pulled us out warned that water at 38 degrees Fahrenheit kills in less than 20 minutes. Of the 2,218 people who boarded the Millennium, 2,199 survived. 19 never came home, lost to Alaska's freezing waters. The Minnesota family made it. Joaquin needed surgery but healed. Ezekiel later said the glacier, even after everything, was still the most stunning thing he had ever seen. The official reports showed the ship hit an underwater ice shelf, formed unusually far south by early winter freezing. Climate change made the glaciers unpredictable, creating dangers outside any chart. Celebrity Cruises later paid a $1.8 billion settlement, but money could never bring back the 19 who were gone forever. Lola and I never cruised again. Whenever we see ads showing Alaska's glaciers, we don't see beauty. We hear the sound of the Millennium being crushed, remember the bitter cold of rowing through darkness, and think of those 19 empty seats at breakfast. We found Joaquin pinned under a fallen pool table, his leg twisted and badly hurt. He was awake, but in pain. Together, Ezekiel and I pulled the table off and helped him escape. Getting him down the stairs was slow, but when we looked outside, we saw distant helicopter lights. The Coast Guard was coming, but still an hour away. The ship was sinking deeper, the tilt sharper, and the constant sound of steel grinding against ice tore through our nerves. Back at the muster station, Lola and Lucille with Kailani were already assigned to Lifeboat 14, but lowering lifeboats against a leaning glacier-crushed ship was nearly impossible. Then came another order that made everyone shake in fear. "All passengers on decks 1 to 4, abandon ship immediately. Water has reached the main engines. This is a code red." Peering out at Glacier Bay, we saw lifeboats scattered in the icy black water, some already rescued by Coast Guard cutters, others fighting to stay steady in the cold. At 5:30 a.m., with the first light touching the glacier, the sound we had all feared filled the air. The ship's hull was breaking apart under the ice. The Millennium was being crew hat mourning. Cruise companies sell Alaska as the last untouched frontier, full of beauty and wonder. What they don't say is how unforgiving it is. Out there, rescue is hours away, and cold water kills faster than anyone can imagine. The inside passage is breathtaking, but also deadly, with ice appearing without warning and storms changing in minutes. The next time you see glossy pictures of Glacier Bay in a brochure, remember the Millennium and the passengers who never returned, because sometimes the last frontier becomes your final destination, our following. Story 4. Paradise on Fire. The nightmare starts with a family who spent 18 months saving up for their dream vacation, only to find out that paradise can quickly turn into hell in the middle of the Caribbean. Last summer, my husband Wade and I surprised our teenage kids with what we thought would be the perfect trip: a 7-day Western Caribbean cruise on the Carnival Paradise. We'd been planning for over a year, saving every extra dollar from Wade's overtime at the plant and my weekend shifts at the hospital. The kids had been begging us for a real vacation, tired of the same camping trips and lake house weekends. When we finally showed them the cruise brochures with rock climbing, surf simulators, and Broadway-style shows, their faces lit up like it was Christmas morning. The trip cost us $6,800 for the four of us, which was a big stretch, but we wanted to give our family this one amazing adventure. The Carnival Paradise looked massive. 15 decks, more than 3,000 passengers, and endless things to do. Our cabin on Deck 9 wasn't fancy, but we planned to be out exploring anyway. As we left Miami on a sunny July 4th weekend, everything felt like a dream. The kids were already making friends in the teen club. Wade had his eye on the sports bar, and I was finally ready to relax after years of nonstop work. The first 4 days felt magical. We explored Mayan ruins in Cozumel, snorkeled in the clear waters of Jamaica, shopped duty-free in Nassau, and spent an entire day on the private beach at Coco Cay. The kids loved the Flow Rider surf simulator, and every night we dressed up for dinner and saw different shows in the main theater. Zuri, our 14-year-old, kept saying it was the best vacation of her life, and even Nico, our 16-year-old son, who's usually moody, was actually having fun. The ship felt like a floating city. We tried new restaurants, found hidden lounges, and everywhere we went, the crew smiled and welcomed us warmly. The weather was perfect, the sea was calm, and for the first time in years, Wade and I felt like we could just breathe and enjoy being together. By Thursday night, after 4 perfect days, we were already talking about booking another cruise next year. We fell asleep to the sound of the ocean, feeling thankful for the trip. We had no idea that by morning, everything would fall apart and our dream vacation would become our family's worst nightmare. I woke around 5 a.m., Friday, to a strange grinding noise somewhere deep in the ship. Wade was still asleep and the kids were in the next room, so I tried to ignore it. But the sound kept getting louder, uneven, like something was badly broken. By 6:30, the ship's movements had changed. Instead of the smooth rocking we'd gotten used to, it jerked and shuddered so hard that the furniture slid across the room. Our cabin door rattled like never before. That's when Nico knocked, looking pale. "Mom, Dad, something's wrong. The lights keep flickering, and there's a burning smell in the hall." When we opened the door, we smelled it too, sharp and chemical. The hallway was eerily quiet for a ship normally alive with morning activity. Crew members rushed by with radios, speaking in languages we didn't understand, faces serious. A housekeeper told us, "Please return to cabin," situation being handled. But her shaking hands and scared eyes told a different story. At 8 a.m., Captain King made an announcement. His voice, usually upbeat, now sounded tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've experienced a mechanical failure in our propulsion system. As a safety measure, please report to your muster stations." What he didn't say was that black smoke was now coming through vents around the ship. Our cabin, once cozy, became unlivable. The air conditioning failed, smoke seeped in, and Zuri started coughing hard. We couldn't stay there. Opening the door revealed thick haze filling the corridor. Families were already rushing out, covering their faces with wet towels. Children were crying, parents tried to stay calm, and older passengers were struggling to breathe. The elevators were shut down, forcing everyone to cram into stairwells. I carried Zuri while Wade helped an older man who collapsed from smoke. Nico stayed close, his face white with fear. At muster station deck 4, the same crew member who had joked with us during the drill now looked just as scared as we were. When asked how long repairs would take, he admitted he didn't know. "The team is working on it," he said, his voice shaking. Then a loud explosion echoed from below, followed by screaming from the lower decks. By noon, it was clear this was no small problem. The engines had completely failed, leaving us drifting helplessly between Jamaica and the Bahamas. Fires had broken out on several decks, and the crew was losing control. Captain King announced again, this time his voice almost breaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have lost main power and are running on emergency systems only. The U.S. Coast Guard has been notified." Around us, Families were panicking. Smoke was thicker, kids were hyperventilating, and an elderly woman fainted near us. At 2 p.m., the ship suddenly tilted hard to one side, sending people sliding across the deck. The same chairs we had sunbathed on now slammed into passengers. For moments it felt like the ship might capsize. Nico grabbed me and Zuri, Wade clung to a railing, and everywhere people screamed and prayed. A man nearby hugged his daughter, whispering goodbye. That was when I realized we might not survive. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. The ship groaned and creaked as if it might tear apart. Passengers below screamed about flooding while crew members ran in chaos. The emergency generators failed off and on, plunging us into darkness. Each blackout brought waves of hysteria. Thousands trapped, no power, no escape. Around 4 p.m., we heard crew yelling about abandoning ship. Some panicked crew members tried to lower lifeboats without orders. One boat crashed against the hull and was destroyed. In that moment, I knew we were on our own. Wade and I tried to help other families, holding kids close, while fear spread everywhere. Zuri struggled to breathe, Nico tried to be strong, and Wade did everything to keep us together, though I could see he was terrified too. The Coast Guard finally reached us around 6 p.m. from Key West, but the rescue was extremely dangerous. The ship leaned so badly that helicopters couldn't land, and rescue boats risked being crushed. We watched one Coast Guard vessel nearly smashed against the ship. Actual evacuation didn't begin until the next morning when more ships arrived and the weather calmed. Families with small kids and the elderly were first. Our family wasn't evacuated until Saturday afternoon, more than 36 hours after the ordeal began. By then, Zuri had been treated for smoke inhalation, and many passengers were hospitalized with injuries. The Coast Guard cutters that rescued us were cramped and basic, but they felt like heaven. Fresh air, working bathrooms, and solid floors felt like miracles. When we finally reached Miami, we learned the Carnival Paradise had suffered catastrophic engine failure, multiple electrical fires, and serious structural damage. The ship stayed out of service for over a year. The story made national news, and lawyers began calling us about joining lawsuits. Our family was never the same. 4 days of happiness were wiped out by 1 day of terror. Zuri still wakes up from nightmares about the smoke, and Nico refuses to even look at cruise ads. Medical bills from Zuri's treatment weren't fully covered, adding financial pain to the trauma. Carnival offered us partial refunds and cruise vouchers, which felt like a cruel joke. The worst part wasn't just the failure itself. It was realizing how fast everything can turn when you're trapped far from land. We will never cruise again. Now, every time I see those glossy commercials promising perfect vacations, I remember how 4 magical days ended in horror, and how the company we trusted with our safety failed us when it mattered most. The subsequent horror. Story 5. The anniversary betrayal shows itself, and it begins with a wife who thought she was reigniting love on her anniversary cruise, only to find her husband's sweet messages were meant for someone else and part of a plan to kill her. My name is Milani, and my husband Damien and I had been married 8 years when we decided to spend on a celebrity eclipse cruise for our anniversary. We had saved $4,200 over 2 years for this 7-day Caribbean trip, booking a balcony cabin on Deck 8. Damien worked as a financial advisor, and I was a dental hygienist. We were a normal middle-class couple from Ohio who rarely traveled anywhere beyond quick weekend trips to Cedar Point. The ship itself was stunning. It carried 2,850 passengers, had several pools, Broadway-style entertainment, and restaurants that seemed too fancy for us. Our cabin, 8258, had a lovely ocean view with its own balcony, and for that first day, everything felt like the romance we both needed. Damien had been buried in 60-hour work weeks, and I had picked up extra shifts just to afford this trip. This was meant to be our time to reconnect. We left Fort Lauderdale on a Sunday afternoon, heading toward our first stop in Cozumel, Mexico. But by the second day, I noticed something that unsettled me. Damien kept staring at his phone constantly, even though we had bought the pricey Wi-Fi package just so we could escape work stress. Whenever I asked, he would quickly set the phone face down and insist it was just work emails, but I caught flashes of message alerts that clearly weren't from his office. The first major warning came on day 3 while we were relaxing at the solarium pool on deck 12. Damien went to grab us drinks from the bar, leaving his phone behind. When it buzzed, the preview popped up. "Missing you already? Can't wait to see you in Cozumel tomorrow. Love, D." I froze. We were docking in Cozumel the next day, but Damien had told me he wanted to stay on the ship instead of leaving. Now I knew the reason. I quickly memorized the phone number and pretended to be napping when he returned with the drinks. That night, I waited until Damien was asleep and carefully checked his phone. What I found broke me completely. There were months of messages with a woman named Daniela. They planned secret meetups, exchanged photos, and spoke about their romance as if I didn't exist. It turned out their affair had lasted 6 months, and she was actually on the same ship, staying in cabin 9112 with her husband, Cade. The most horrifying part was a recent message I read from that same day. "Cade suspects something. We need to be more careful. Maybe it's time to stop pretending and just disappear together in Mexico." The next morning in Cozumel, Damien told me he was sick and wanted to stay in the cabin. But when the ship docked at the international pier, I saw him leave alone, wearing the new polo shirt I had just bought him. My hands trembling, I decided to follow him. I got off the ship about half an hour later and hired a taxi to take me near Chankanaab Beach Park, where tourists usually went. It didn't take long before I spotted him at a beachside restaurant called Carlos and Charlie's, sitting across from a beautiful blonde woman in her early 30s, Daniela. They were holding hands across the table, looking like a couple in love. I sat at a nearby table where I could watch without being seen. For 2 hours, I watched my husband be kinder and more affectionate with this stranger than he had been with me in years. He played with her hair, fed her food, laughed at everything she said, and took selfies with her. It was like he had given everything I once had to someone else. Then, their words shifted to something darker. I couldn't catch it all, but I heard pieces. Permanent solution. Life insurance. Make it look natural. Daniela then pulled out a small bottle, showing Damien, and mentioned how just a few drops in a drink could trigger a heart attack. That's when it hit me. They weren't only cheating. They were planning my murder. I quickly ran back to the pier, heart racing. Their plan was to kill me during the cruise and stage it as a health issue at sea. With my known history of anxiety and occasional heart flutters, it would be believable. Damien knew exactly how to fake it. That evening, Damien returned to the cabin acting tired and apologizing for missing the port. At dinner in the specialty restaurant we had reserved months before, I kept my eyes on him. When I excused myself, I saw him take something from his pocket and slip it into my wine. My chest pounded so hard, I thought it really might fail. I returned to the table and pretended to sip, but I didn't swallow. Damien watched me closely, waiting. I excused myself again, pretending to feel dizzy, and saw the relief on his face as if everything was falling into place. In the bathroom, I forced myself to throw up, then went back to play along. Soon, Damien was acting the part of the loving husband, calling for medical help, holding my hand, and telling the ship's doctor about my heart problems. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed him too. The staff wanted me to stay overnight, but I insisted I just needed rest. Back in the cabin, I faked being unconscious while Damien hovered nearby. That's when I heard him whispering on the phone to Daniela. "It's done. She's out cold. The doctor said if it happens again tomorrow, they'll recommend she be flown out in Grand Cayman. That's when we go." Using my phone, I secretly recorded every word. He talked about the insurance, disappearing to Costa Rica, and admitted he had been dosing me in small amounts for weeks to create a record of medical issues. The next morning, I went to ship security and also contacted the FBI through the Coast Guard system. By the time we docked in Fort Lauderdale, both Damian and Daniela were arrested. The small bottle they found contained digitalis, a deadly drug strong enough to stop my heart. What was supposed to be a special anniversary cruise became the case that proved my husband had tried to kill me. I later finalized my divorce while he awaited trial, and though I feel safer, I've never felt so betrayed or alone. I learned that the real horror sometimes isn't a stranger hiding in the dark. It's the person lying beside you every night, planning your death while toasting with champagne under the warm glow of paradise. Another mystery awaits, and this one opens with newlyweds. Story 6. Lost in the Triangle thought their honeymoon cruise had the most advanced navigation in the world until they discovered some waters that refused to exist on any map. What was meant to be my honeymoon trip aboard the Oceanic Dawn turned into a fight for survival when the ship's navigation suddenly failed and left 3,200 passengers lost inside the Bermuda Triangle. My name is Bodhi, and this is how my wife Sella and I ended up trapped in the most dangerous waters on Earth with no way home. It was October 15th, 2024. After 2 years of stressful wedding planning, we finally boarded Royal Caribbean's newest vessel, the Oceanic Dawn, for a 7-day cruise from Miami to Bermuda. The ship was massive, 1,100 feet long, 18 decks tall, carrying over 3,000 passengers and nearly 1,400 crew. She was built with the best GPS systems, satellite links, and backups meant to keep her safe under any condition. Captain Daryl had been sailing the seas for 22 years, and during the safety drill, he laughed that with all the computers on board, the ship basically sailed itself. "We have 3 backup GPS units," he said proudly. "Out here, it's impossible to get lost." From our balcony stateroom on Deck 11, the sea stretched endlessly, and for the first 2 days, it felt like pure perfection. Romantic dinners, live shows, and that special honeymoon feeling. Everything was better than we had hoped for. But on day 3, about 400 miles northeast of Nassau, something strange began to happen. That morning, while eating breakfast in the Windjammer Cafe, Sella pointed outside. "Body, look, wasn't that the same island we passed earlier?" Sure enough, the same horseshoe-shaped island with twin peaks appeared again, though it should have been far behind us. We were supposed to be sailing straight toward Bermuda with no land for hundreds of miles. Later, I mentioned it to a crew member, and he brushed it off, saying routes sometimes changed because of weather and the computers adjusted automatically, but his uneasy face suggested he didn't believe it himself. That evening, more passengers noticed problems. Compass apps on our phones spun wildly, unable to point north. The captain's usual announcements cut off halfway, replaced with static. "Ladies and gentlemen, just some minor navigation adjustments. No need to worry," Captain Daryl's voice crackled before cutting out. That night on our balcony, Chella and I looked at the stars. But something was wrong. The constellations were nothing I recognized in 22 years of stargazing. It was like looking at an alien sky. Then, at 3:47 a.m. on the 4th day, the ship's alarm jolted us awake. 7 short blasts and 1 long one, the universal signal to abandon ship. This wasn't a drill. Panicked passengers rushed through the halls in their pajamas with life jackets on, following glowing arrows to muster stations. The ship tilted slightly to one side, and deep inside the hull we could hear rushing water. "Everyone to muster stations! This is not a drill!" crew shouted. At muster station C on Deck 7, hundreds of us waited silently until Captain Daryl appeared, no longer calm or confident. His face was pale, his voice unsteady. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we are facing a situation unlike anything I've seen. All 3 navigation systems are giving different coordinates, none of which match any known place on Earth. Our satellites cannot connect to the Coast Guard, to other ships, or even to our own headquarters. We are also taking on water, but our crew can't find the cause, and our radar shows land around us that doesn't exist on any charts. The crowd gasped. The truth was clear. We weren't just off course, we were lost in waters that should not exist. Over the next hours, things grew worse. The engines groaned with metallic grinding noises. The air systems failed on and off, leaving some decks boiling hot while others froze. Even the water around us looked wrong, not blue, but a dark greenish-black that seemed to swallow light. On day 5, a storm appeared on the horizon, but it was nothing natural. The clouds glowed an unnatural purple with lightning flashing inside. When it hit, the ship was thrown like a toy. Waves taller than the upper deck smashed windows and flooded walkways. Sella and I were thrown against the walls as the whole vessel twisted under impossible stress. The noises were terrifying, metal bending, glass breaking, and beneath it, a low humming sound that came from the sea itself. "Mayday! Mayday!" Captain Dariel's voice crackled over the speakers before cutting off into static. The panicked navigator shouted in the background, "Captain, the instruments say we're surrounded by land, but all we see is water." For 12 straight hours, the nightmare storm hammered us. People were injured as furniture flew across cabins. The hull screamed like something was crushing it, and the humming below grew louder, vibrating through our bones. Then, without warning, it all stopped. Not slowly like storms usually fade, but instantly. Suddenly we floated on calm seas under a clear sky. When the computers flickered back online, we saw the impossible truth. We had been moved nearly 800 miles from our last known position. Chief Engineer Elijah worked with the emergency generators and managed to restart the engines at low power. "We can make it to the nearest port," she said over the intercom, "but it will take 3 days and we'll be running on reserves." So the Oceanic Dawn crawled through the ocean like a broken beast. Food and water were rationed, blankets were shared, and we pumped water out of flooded decks by hand. Sella organized volunteer groups to help doctors with the injured. I joined a group that distributed supplies. Strangers became family as we survived together. 3 days later, we finally limped into Halifax Harbor. But instead of comfort, we were met with lawyers. Royal Caribbean's crisis team told us, "Due to an act of God clause in your contract, the company is not liable for weather or satellite failures caused by unusual electromagnetic activity. No refunds, no compensation, just a 25% off voucher for another cruise." Most of us would never step on a ship again. Many elderly passengers had to beg family to send money for hotels and flights. The company blamed a solar storm in their official statement. But we knew the truth. The Oceanic Dawn never sailed again under that name. Months later, she reappeared in Europe, renamed the Mediterranean Star. Survivors like us stayed in touch, forming a support group and meeting every October 15th. We didn't gather to relive the nightmare, but to remember how ordinary people worked together when everything collapsed. The official investigation was sealed, and the final report never released. When reporters asked questions, they were told the information was classified for security reasons. What happened on the Oceanic Dawn taught me something I'll never forget. The real danger at sea isn't storms or broken machines. It's the moment you realize all the safety nets and expert promises are just illusions. Because when you're truly lost in the Atlantic, the only rescue that matters is the one you create with your own hands. These 6 real maritime disasters prove that paradise can turn into horror in seconds. From murder plots to vanishing ships, these aren't just stories. They are warnings backed by survivors and hidden investigations. If this changed how you think about cruise ships, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell for more true mysteries the cruise industry doesn't want you to know. Comment which story shocked you the most. This is Eerie Hour. Stay vigilant because the ocean never forgets.